Hi, friends. You are listening to the EntreEd Talk podcast, where we feature amazing educators and entrepreneurs showcasing how you can bring entrepreneurship into the classroom. We believe entrepreneurship is for everyone. I am your host, Toy Hirschman, and I am so glad you chose to join me on this journey. Let's go. All right, everybody. Welcome back to another fun episode of the EntreEd Talk podcast. I'm your host, Toy Hirschman, and I am very excited to have with me back today, Henry Greenberg. Henry was with us on episode 68, which is a little more than a year ago. So this will be really interesting. So Henry will tell you a little more about himself, but Henry launched the SOAR program, and that is an initiative that helps to bring entrepreneurship education into classrooms. And that is exactly our heart and our passion here at EntreEd. So I'm excited to hear more about what's been going on with Henry. So welcome, Henry. Welcome back.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Toy, for having me back. It's great to be here. So for people who didn't catch the first episode, my name is Henry Greenberg. I'm the founder of SOAR Entrepreneurship, based out in Canada, just outside of the Toronto area. I am working with schools and students directly to bring entrepreneurship, creativity, and innovation to life through enriching educational experiences, whether that be through project-based learning programs in classrooms or through the SOAR Summer Innovation Camp, which has really been my focus for the last little while. So I'm excited to tell you more about that today.
Awesome. Well, we're excited to have you. I just loved having you on before because your passion, and you're so young and that's so exciting, but your passion and your entrepreneurial vision is actually so identically in line with ours. And I'm just so excited to see someone that's doing what you're doing in your area. And just really hope that that people will take advantage of SOAR when they have the opportunity, because it's just fantastic. So give us a little bit of background, just for those that may not have heard it the first time, Henry. How did you come up with this idea? And then actually take it, which is the scariest part, right? You came up with this great idea, but then you took it into the world for real and made something great. So if you could just share your own entrepreneurial story, that would be really great to hear again.
Sure. Okay, so SOAR started, it's sort of a long story, so I'll make it short. It started in late 2018 as part of a school project, which was to promote entrepreneurship to the community. I developed a pilot program and launched it with a grade 7 teacher in Oakville, Ontario, Canada, where I live. That pilot program was very successful initially. Students enjoyed it. We were working with the students to have them develop their own business ventures over the course of about 3 weeks. So that pilot program was successful, and it was part of this project specifically. Then the following year, when I had time off, because I worked ahead to be able to finish high school earlier, I had the opportunity to launch SOAR officially in classrooms. So I started working in grade 7 and 8 classrooms in Ontario, mostly in the French immersion programs there, so in English and in French. And that was going very well until COVID-19 came about in March of 2020, which of course shut schools down. That led me to pivot SOAR to an online model where I was working more with students directly rather than through the schools, but still doing some work with schools as well. And then that sort of brings me to 2021 right now. Now it's September when this is being recorded, and I just wrapped up the second year actually of the SOAR Summer Innovation Camp online program for lots of students in Canada, and then 1 or 2 in the States, and even as far as Egypt. So it was a very exciting summer of lots of learning. It was definitely challenging coming off of a year of online schooling for everyone, but we got through the summer successfully, and it was lots of fun.
That's amazing. Now, did you do things in person this summer?
No, I didn't. No, so it's still sort of difficult. It's moving back where we are to in person, but the sort of the one beauty of having it online is that SOAR can reach more students than it normally would have been able to in person. So this year in particular, it was all online, but there were students from all across Ontario, where I'm based, and then in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, in Nova Scotia. And so it gives me the ability to reach other provinces in Canada, and by extension reach more students, so spread the mission a little bit further.
That's wonderful. So can you talk a little bit about what your program looks like now that it's virtual, kind of like what the day, like if I was a student in your camp, what would that look like for and this is the SOAR Summer Innovation Camp.
Exactly. So the SOAR Summer Innovation Camp this year, it looked a little bit different than it did last year in 2020, just because I had a year to sort of sort out the kinks of it and get it more like a well-oiled machine. So this year, the way it worked was there were 2 cohorts each day, so a morning afternoon cohort of students. So just like in a school, AM, PM classes. The morning class would come in at about 9 a.m. and we'd be together until 11:30, and then there would be a break, and then the afternoon class would come in from 12:30 to 3. So in that 2.5-hour time block, it would be broken up into smaller activities. There would usually be a lesson-based part of the day where students would be learning about an entrepreneurial concept together. So maybe it could be like advertising. We did sort of an advertising scavenger hunt where students would find cool advertisements online and share them with the other people in the class. So there'd usually be a lesson part. Maybe it was about finances or calculating the market size of a business opportunity. And then there would be time for students to work on their own projects. So throughout all 4 weeks of the camp, the students were working on creating their own ventures, their own business ventures. And so each day in the camp, they had a little bit of time to work on that and the various components of that project. So creating a budget, creating a prototype, iterating your prototype, creating a website, creating your marketing, all these sort of different steps to the project. And then the third component of the day would usually be a team challenge, which would allow the students to work together in teams on a specific challenge that wasn't necessarily related to their venture. So it was more of an isolated mini challenge in a sense to get them acquainted with collaborating virtually and with the other people in the camp. So an example of that would have been I worked with someone who works at a startup in Toronto, that 21 Toys, which is a great startup in Toronto. They provide training and facilitation to schools and companies using their own design of toys. There's one called the Empathy Toy, one called the Failure Toy, and that gets the people that they're working with engaged in those topics like empathy and failure. The challenge that we did, which was very, very popular with the SOAR students, it was posed by Ryan from 21 Toys. He was saying that their new toy is called the Improv Toy. And it's a toy to teach improvisation and get mostly sort of C-suite level people working collaboratively and being more improvisational in their thinking. And so we had the students design what this particular toy would look like, what it would be like, and then they would present it to me. And then one group of students that we deemed had the best pitch or the highest quality pitch then got a consultation with Ryan from 21 Toys afterwards to share their idea and think of ways to take it to the next level. And so those students were really excited. They came after the camp had already ended in August to work on that, on further developing that idea for that mini challenge. So I'm excited to see how that will continue. So that was an example of one of the mini challenges in the camp. That was a lot of fun and it was really popular. And then other examples of things were like, come up with a way for movie theaters to innovate after COVID-19, and just because they don't have as many customers due to streaming and things like that. So to innovate the movie theater experience. Another cool one was in the last week of camp, we had students innovate the SOAR program itself. So they would have come up with a new innovation to develop SOAR, enhance the program for future years, future students. So, and a lot of them actually expressed that it was a unique opportunity because they had been to other summer camps where it was sort of, they just do the program and that's it. But this is very fluid and it's growing, where they can provide their input. They can say, you know, we didn't really like this activity, or we loved this activity, do more of this, less of this, and then that can be adapted for future years. So they would come up with sort of new models to add to the SOAR program, different themes for camps for next year. So that was really cool, and it provided student voice as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. That's
Thank you.
a really great idea, because it really does bring the students into that decision-making process. And then
absolutely.
And then it's like a win-win, because then it helps you figure out what's going to work best for that's really cool. I love that idea. I wish more people did stuff like that. So I love these challenges, and especially this 21 Toys connection. How fun is that? That is so exciting.
It was fun, yes.
That is so cool. I hope you let us know what comes of that consult, because that's really cool. So it sounds like on all of the things you do, and this is really interesting. I have like two parts of this question. So you do a lot of project-based learning, which I love. And I'd love for you to share the reason why you think project-based learning is so critical in entrepreneurship. And then the second part of that is, how in the world do you engage students in project-based learning during this year? Because that's hard to do when they're at home and you don't know what they're going to have. And so I'd just love for you to just talk about both of those things. Why do you do that, and how in the heck did you do it?
Sure. So why project-based learning? It's because just in general for life itself, everything that you do in one way or another is a project. So whether you're going to do a renovation on your home, or you're building a bookcase, or anything you sort of do in your day-to-day life is a project in a sense, cooking a meal. So the process of working through something with multiple steps is just a crucial skill for any sort of task that students would do in their day-to-day lives, regardless of whether it has to do with entrepreneurship. And then the second fold answer to that question is that entrepreneurship is very multifaceted by nature. There are lots of steps involved, lots of different disciplines come into play. So the connection to project-based learning in creating an educational experience tied in with curriculum just seems natural for entrepreneurship as a discipline, because it is so inherently rich and interdisciplinary. So that's why the whole program is structured around projects, around these multi-step projects that they may seem very big, very scary at the start of the camp, but we go through it step by step to eventually get a final product, and then they can see it's not that bad, not that scary. So the whole problem solving, creativity, critical thinking, planning aspect of it is just important for life. And then in the school sense, it's like a very engaging way to bring curriculum to life. And not so much in the past year, but before, when I was doing more work in schools heavily with the curriculum focus, we tied entrepreneurship into math, into French language, English language arts, science, geography, health, dramatic arts, media. So there's so many connections there that can make the school experience more engaging and more fun.
Yeah, I love that. That's
And
so similar to it. I'll let you answer the second part, but I just have to say, like, that's so much in line with what we do with our America's Entrepreneur Schools program. We are the same way. We want to meet teachers where they are. So we don't say, hey, math teacher, you need to learn this whole separate thing. We make it's not separate, right? Because it fits in every area. So it's really nice to be able to say, we're not asking you to change anything that you do as a teacher drastically. We're just adding you to add a layer onto it that will support and enhance your curriculum and also even make it more relevant. I like that you said that about that entrepreneurship part, and then the learning by doing, this experiential project-based learning, really it builds students' confidence in the area of entrepreneurship, but it also is so much more engaging and relevant to them because they get to have more ownership of their learning that way. So I love that. But now I want to know, how did you do this thing virtually? Because let me tell you,
Yes.
I have been through the ringer with this, and I thought I was pretty slick at virtual learning. So,
it's challenging. It's very challenging. I'm not going to lie, but I think it was very successful because the students did produce. We did see the outcome, and I did see all the progress that they went through to get to that outcome. So that indicates that it was successful, that they were able to do project-based learning completely virtually. I didn't, and you can't see me now, but I didn't really see many of the students. There were some that I never saw once throughout the entire program, what they actually looked like. Which could be challenging. It could be a challenge for some, and it is a challenge, but I think since the program itself was fairly engaging for them, it sort of pulled them in, it roped them in to be engaged with the learning. So the fact that we weren't able to see each other wasn't as imminent. It didn't seem like as big of a deal that we weren't able to see each other. So I think that's one of the key things, is that just by connecting to the students, connecting to their interests, making it sort of a low stakes environment, but still putting high expectations, will allow them to know that it's a safe space to fail, and it's a safe space to make mistakes and learn, but they're still going to be coming up with an outcome, producing something of value. The other important thing that was important for me to recognize as the instructor of the program, and for the students as well, was that they're not in school during the program, so it's not for a report card grade, the work that they're doing ultimately. So that pressure isn't necessarily there. From some of the interactions that I've had with students in the camp, they had sort of the expectations on themselves that it was like school. So they were asking, well, if I don't do this, what affect this? And can I have an extension on this? Is it okay if I hand this in later? And so I would have to sort of explain that it isn't necessarily school where you're going to get docked marks for handing in something late. It's about you. It's about you enjoying the program and learning and having fun. So trying to take that pressure off and make it into a more lower stakes environment, I think, was crucial in in getting these students to actually complete projects in their summer. So they're choosing to be there. So it shouldn't feel like a chore for them to have to be there and have to do their projects. It should be something that they'd get excited about and they'd want to do. And for some, of course, it's not as obvious in the work as others, but for some who really were engaged and really into doing these sort of things, it really was visible in their final work. There were students who created, working prototypes of apps and websites, and their advertising was very slick, and they had great logos, and they put a lot of work into their videos, and they were interviewing their friends outside of the program to gain user feedback on their products and their projects. So I think naturally, if you're into it and you're engaged with it, then you're going to do a good job. And if it isn't something you're as sort of jazzed about, then just building the relationships with the students and making the environment safe is sort of the key to doing project-based learning successfully online.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm so glad. I'm so thankful that you were able to do that this summer, because that was hard for a lot of kids coming off of the virtual. They're like, I don't want to look at, I don't want to be on a Zoom. Of course they want to look at a screen if it's like their games, but I don't want to be on a Zoom. I don't want to be on a Google Meet. But yeah, the fact that you were able to do that's a testament to you, because that's very difficult. I was in a class for a little while towards the end, and half of the class was virtual, and several of them didn't turn on their cameras, and it was hard to adjust to, am I even making sense to this person? Am I even coming through? And that's challenging, but I'm glad you were able to see the outcomes. And your day is structured really cool. So they did their overarching project where they were developing a product or business or product service. They did that individually, right?
Yes, they did.
And so that's cool. So then they had, because you wouldn't know that I can't imagine trying to get them to be teams.
Well, actually, for some projects there were teams, like the toy challenge that I described. They were in teams for that. Not everybody, would be as enthused about meeting the other people outside of the camp hours, but one group did actually tell me directly that they were tired coming to the camp in the morning because they'd been talking to each other through a Zoom or through a Google Meet at like 1 o'clock in the morning the previous day, working on their projects and finishing things up and talking. And I was so happy to hear that, because the fact that they were able to just make a connection with another student that had a similar interest to them outside of the camp was so gratifying, so rewarding for me to know that just the camp had a small part in making that connection that could hopefully last a long time. And the other really cool thing about it was that the grades in the program were grades 7 to 12. So the youngest students were 11, the oldest ones were 16, 17. So that is sort of a big age gap that some parents, some people were, and some students for that matter, were actually concerned about before the camp started, being with younger students or being with students who are a lot older than them. But once we got started, the age gap didn't really seem to matter anymore. And there was one particular example where there was a student who was quite a bit older, who was working with students who were quite a bit younger. And he said, normally I wouldn't want to be in a group with a grade 7 student or grade 8 student being in grade 11 or 12. But since we were virtual and we didn't necessarily see each other, we were just able to get to know the person through voice and realize that, maybe this is a cool person that I'd like to worked on something with, and they're a mature person. So that broke down some of the barriers to forming friendships as well.
Wow. Oh, that gave me goosebumps. That's nice. It's because you wouldn't, like a senior or junior wouldn't even, oh, no way I'm talking to middle schooler.
Yeah, and the other thing, when I was doing that challenge that I mentioned where they'd be innovating the SOAR program, I asked if this program was held in person, would you still want to do it, or would you prefer to do it online? And most of them actually said that they would prefer it online. And the reason was because one person said, which I hadn't really considered, is that on the first day of school, which is today for a lot of people, or the first day of camp, when you're lining up and you're dropped off and you see the other people, you'd make first impressions naturally on who you'd want to be there, who you'd want to be friends with. And so this person said that since you couldn't see anybody, you didn't really have that, you couldn't really make those first impressions because you just saw somebody's name and their voice, heard their voice. So that allowed them to be friends with people that they wouldn't necessarily interact with. And then for people who were, you know, maybe a little bit more shy naturally, or more would be more self-conscious in person, not being seen by the other students allowed them to take more risks, and be more vulnerable in a sense of, if they fail or they make a mistake at something, it's not like they're going to be judged by these peers that they've been to school with for a long time. It's a new batch of people, so some people felt that it was actually a more safe environment being online, which I thought was very interesting.
That is interesting, but you're right that the students are right that there is that level of bias, whether you like it or not. When you naturally gravitate to people that you feel might be in your, in your wheelhouse and in your so that is really cool. That's amazing. What an unexpected but beautiful outcropping of this, where you've got this, like, you basically broke down bias, and by having it online and having these kids interact and not knowing, not where it didn't matter what grade you were in or where. That's really cool. That is really cool. So I'm curious, in your opinion, as we're moving forward and as you're talking to schools and teachers and everybody, what do you think will change for this year? Do you think do you plan on staying online, or do you think you might be able to get back into the schools a little bit?
I would hope so, being able to go back into the schools a little bit. Probably what I would hope, what the idea would be for me, is that I'd be able to get back to some of the schools that I have relationships with already, that are in the area where I live. In the school board, it's a really great school board where I live. So I'd hope that I'd be able to, at some point this year, maybe not within the first few months, but maybe more towards the spring or the winter, be able to go in person. It ultimately depends on the directive of the school boards and the Ministry of Education about their protocols on letting guests come into the school. I'm fully vaccinated and ready to go, but I'll have to wait for that. I think there's really an advantage in doing things online. As I mentioned before, it can allow me to work with areas that I wouldn't be able to access ordinarily. At the very beginning of last school year, when it was the first school year dealing with COVID, I was able to work with a school in Thunder Bay, Ontario, which is about 16-hour drive from Oakville, Ontario, where I live, all the way on the other side of the province. So I would never be able to drive there in person to do the program there, but since it was virtual, I was just able to click a button on my computer and and teach the class. So that was very nice. It's not necessarily the same feel working with a class where they're all at school and I'm at home. But there's, as I mentioned, there's pros and cons to both. For the camp, one thing that I would be interested in doing is having sort of options for students where there could be a virtual cohort of students, or there could be a cohort of students in one location, sort of like a satellite program run by an educator or run by a school board or run by an entrepreneur in a particular region who'd be interested in licensing the program. So I think that could be a possibility of doing it a little bit in a hybrid online virtual format, but I definitely like online. I think there's real advantages to it. And I know it's not popular for a lot of people, but for me personally, it's been fairly successful and I'd like to continue that. I think it just opens up more doors. And then just for SOAR itself, the future of what would come, I'd like to do more camp programs, even sort of after school extracurricular programs during the school year that students would be able to sign up for independently. Talking with students in my programs, there was sort of a general impression that since they'd be in school throughout the year, in person at school, it wouldn't be as much of a hassle to have to do something online, whereas before they were online in school and then online again in the summer. So it was Zoom fatigue, screen overboard. So I think it could be the virtual format wouldn't be as tiring for some people. And then just in general, doing more theme programs about specific themes. And then hopefully by 2022, I'll just put it out there right now that I will hopefully be able to have French programs put in place, because in Canada, there's lots of French immersion students, very popular programs. So I would hopefully be able to do a French program next summer as well.
Oh,
Those are my
wow.
goals.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. I like the idea of the satellite groups. That's a pretty cool idea. And that's something that, so say I was a teacher in a high school, let's say, but I'm trying to make a after school program, and I'd like it to be for entrepreneurship. What could you help me with SOAR? If I got in touch with you and said, hey, I really like SOAR, I want to do this with my kids after school, what do I do?
So yeah, if they got in touch, and there have been people who have started to do that, what would happen is that we have a discussion, of course, to figure out what your needs are, what the needs of the community are, and then if a satellite program would be something of interest, then SOAR could provide the curriculum, the worksheets, the lessons, the resources, how to run the program, so training sessions, offering badges for students for completing the program, all the sort of the structure of it. And then there could be an educator who would facilitate the program with their students in wherever they're located. Right now, the way it worked was, since there wasn't necessarily a restriction on where the students could be, advertising the program was a little bit hard, because technically it could be advertised to the entire world, in a sense. So that's not necessarily easy to advertise, having it in every single school. So if the program was satellite based in a particular region, they could advertise to schools in this district, this county, state, wherever it may be. And then there also could be students who do like the virtual global cohort as well. So it could provide benefits to myself, in the SOAR program as a whole, as well as schools and community centers and after-school programs would be looking to add something new to their offerings without having to develop a program from scratch, because it is a lot of work to develop the program from scratch. And you know, there are lots of other great entrepreneurship programs out there, but if somebody was starting something new from scratch and they wanted to introduce entrepreneurship into their after school program or into their campus offerings and didn't know where to start, the SOAR program could give them that leg up, in the sense that they'd already have the curriculum, they'd already know how it works, and then it would just be more the facilitation part that would be on the end of whoever is running the program.
I love that. We have a lot of schools that we work with that are looking for that kind of thing, where they are in a school. It's either after school or even part of their day. Like they have a lot of our schools have a set aside time that they do entrepreneurial projects. And a lot of the teachers are like, okay, but I just don't know exactly what to do. So that's why I wanted you to say that, because I wanted our audience to know that if you're looking for something, even though Henry is in Canada, not that Canadians, I hope you're listening too, but but for those of you in the US, he's still very much accessible to us because of the virtual platform, which is
absolutely
great. So.
And the other thing that I would add is that just the way I prefer to work, or I like to work, is that I like to be hands-on, in the sense, not that I would not, like with the satellite programs, that I would be in control of everything, but it would be nice for someone who wouldn't necessarily have as much experience with leading entrepreneurship programs to have somebody there to guide them, to answer questions, and to help the students as well from an entrepreneur perspective. Because one thing that I think is interesting about the SOAR program is that I'm an entrepreneur myself who is teaching entrepreneurship. So I have both the role of the facilitator, educator, as well as an entrepreneur. So I can tell students about how I would find clients, how I would advertise my programs, how I went about registering a business, and those sort of logistical things that they sort of provide two different experiences, the experiences of teaching the program and building a business about teaching entrepreneurship. So sort of meta.
Yeah, it is. I think about that all the time. I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur. Wait a minute. But yeah, I think that's amazing. And it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt that you're young, that you're closer in age with students than probably a lot of their teachers. And so it's nice that, you know, that they can see someone like you that's successful and also very close in age to them, where they, you know, not 20 years apart, where, you know, where they could say, oh, you know, that's not only is that possible for me. So just another meta layer onto all of it, you know, there's that undertone of that's also possible for me to do. And it's possible for me to do now. Like if I start a bit, like you're the proof, you're teaching them, but you're like the proof too, where you're like, not only can you start a business, I can prove it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so cool.
And even sort of being closer in age to some of them, just beyond just being able to relate to them, the logistics of starting a business in 2021, or like within the past few years, are different than they were in 2008 or 2007 or 20 or 30 years ago. So somebody else may be an entrepreneur and may have lots of wonderful experience and value to share. But when I started a business, chances are the process of doing that, just down to the logistics of registering the business, would be similar to what the students would be doing in their lives. And so I'm able to share that expertise, since not that every student is going to start a business by any means, and that's not the goal with any program that I run, but it is interesting when there are students who do want to start their own businesses after the program, who seek me out to get that advice.
That's awesome. Well, but regardless, you're planting a seed. So even if, like, we have the same kind of philosophy, we're not expecting every student to run out and start a business. That's not realistic, but some will. But the ones that don't, just by having that experience, now have this thing in their brain that says, that's a career option for me. If I ever want it. It's always there if I ever want it. And that's such a valuable thing for them to know. And honestly, I didn't have that. Not very many people that I know had that experience where even knew entrepreneurship was a thing, much less be able to spell it, which is something I can't do.
For sure. And I, just as an aside to that, I won't say who this person was, but I was talking to somebody a little while ago and explaining the program, and they said something to the effect of, well, I haven't heard of any success stories from the alumni of your program. So like, why is it valuable? Because I haven't heard of any of the students' businesses in the news or anything like that, which I didn't think was a fair assessment, because if a student is 13, you can't expect them to start a business and be in Forbes or be in CNBC like within the next year, because they're in school and being a student is their priority first and foremost. So regardless of whether or not they start a business or they become a whiz kid startup founder, that doesn't matter. What matters is that they have the seed and they have the knowledge, the baseline knowledge of what entrepreneurship is, so that once they're 18, 19, 20, or even older, they could think, oh, I took that SOAR program when I was 13, and that's cool. Maybe I'd like to try entrepreneurship as a career. And that would be very cool in itself. Or some of them may, just get a little bit of knowledge about entrepreneurship as a whole and understand what it is and try it. And then they might say, that's cool, but that's not necessarily something I'd want to do. I'd prefer to do this, or I'd prefer to have more of a traditional career, and that's okay as well. So I think just the seed, as you mentioned, is the important thing.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, what a great way to wrap up, Henry. I'm so thankful that you were able to come back on with us today. And so please share with our audience where they can find you and find out more about SOAR. And please, everybody, keep in mind that this program is open everywhere, not just in Canada, but also in Canada.
Yes.
But
for Canadian listeners, yes.
Take advantage definitely of SOAR and check out all of the things that Henry's about to share. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm all over the web. You can find me at the SOAR EDU on Twitter. HJL_Greenberg is my personal Twitter account. Also SOAR_EDU on Instagram, and SOAR EDU on Facebook, LinkedIn. Those are sort of the best ways to find me. And then on the website, where you can find everything you need to know about the SOAR program, it's soaredu.ca. Very simple. And just recently, actually, I have been putting up some free resources for teachers and educators to download on the SOAR website. So if you're interested in that, definitely check that out.
Awesome. Yes, I saw some of those. They're really great. So everyone, please check it out. And we will put all the links to everything in the show notes. And I'm so excited that you were here to join us again, Henry. And
my pleasure. Thank you so much.
So thankful SOAR is doing well. And I wish great things to come for you.
Thank you so much.